Ye guys, tonight we'll drift into the softly flickering candlelight of long-forgotten castles and gossip-filled chambers of the medieval world. But not the stories you memorized in class. No, these are the tales they never put in textbooks, because someone, somewhere, probably blushed too hard. So dim your lights, fluff your pillow just right, and settle under your favorite blanket. Let the day melt away. And if this calm little journey helps you unwind, feel free to tap like or subscribe, but only if it feels right. You deserve rest, not pressure. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Midnight in Mumbai? Rainy evening in London? Wherever you are, you're exactly where you need to be. Now, close your eyes if you like, or just soften your gaze. Let me tell you about the most perverted queens in medieval history. Let the sound of the fireplace fill your ears for a moment. The soft pop of wood releasing centuries-old air. A warm breath of amber-scented smoke drifting upward through thick stone chimneys. We're in France. Not the Paris you may know with its glitter and cafes, but France of the 14th century, drenched in rain, coated in mud, wrapped in velvet. In the year 1392, inside the royal chateau of St. Paul, Isabeau of Bavaria reclined in her chamber, a place so private and perfumed it felt like a secret held between the folds of a lover's letter. Imagine her room, heavy tapestries depicting mythological beasts, a red and gold canopy bed, walls lined with silk, the colour of crushed berries, and in the corner, a lacquered cabinet carved with ivy vines, locked by a key only she wore on a chain around her neck. That drawer, what was in it? Let's pause here. Breathe with me. Inhale and picture the scent of dried roses. Exhale and let go of your expectations. This isn't a bedtime story they tell at the monastery. That secret drawer was rumoured to contain not jewels, not treaties or coded letters, but objects of pleasure, artfully crafted from ivory, amber and glass. Isabeau didn't blush easily. She was queen after all, not a nun. Her chambermaids, young and curious, would steal glances when they could. One once confessed many years later, while baking apricot tarts, that she had seen a carved dolphin about the length of a radish, yet far more daring. Isabeau had a taste for pleasure, for softness, for things that hummed with hidden meaning. She'd often be found eating candied violets by the hearth, slipper dangling from her foot, reading love poetry with a finger dipped in honey. Ah, yes, honey, her favourite indulgence, not just for bread or cakes. Once during Lent, she asked her steward if it was a sin to drizzle honey over boiled almonds before prayer. The steward fainted. But I digress. She was not always so bold. At 16, she arrived in France, barely able to speak French, nervous, shy, wearing a gown that smelled faintly of Bavarian pine. King Charles VI married her within days. At first, their union seemed sweet, tender, like the early bite of a summer peach, but it soon spoiled. Charles fell ill, not with a cough or fever, but with madness. He believed he was made of glass. He refused to let people touch him. Once, in winter, he ordered his servants to wrap him in quilts, convinced a handshake might shatter him like a wine goblet dropped on stone. What's a young queen to do, married to a man who fears his own reflection? She adapted. She built her own world. She had her chambers redesigned for warmth, for secrecy. She wore silk gowns lined with mink even in summer. Her perfumer created scents just for her, notes of clove, fig leaf and crushed myrrh. Men would say they could smell her approaching even before they saw her. And then, the lovers came. Quietly at first, musicians who lingered too long, courtiers who spoke poetry instead of politics. One, rumour says, was a cardinal's nephew, disguised as a spice merchant. They say he brought her cinnamon from Ceylon, and that she repaid him with a kiss that tasted like fire. Can I tell you something odd? One of her favourite snacks was cheese soaked in white wine. Not just any cheese, she liked the soft, oozing kind wrapped in ash. She said it reminded her of the monks back home. Earthy, forbidden. Imagine her, sitting on her cushioned bench, bare feet tucked beneath her, cutting into that cheese with a silver knife, sipping warm wine, and listening to a bard sing about Helen of Troy. When the song ended, She'd lean over and ask the bard, softly, what he thought of Helen's love life. She wasn't asking academically. There was a chambermaid who said she once found Isabeau asleep, half covered in a crimson cloak, her hand resting on a book of Persian love poetry, open to a page that described a kiss so slowly. It took 3 stanzas. We don't know what happened to that book. Many of her possessions were seized or burned after her death, declared sinful by priests who perhaps envied her pleasures. But some say one ivory carving survived, hidden within the leg of a hollow chair, and still people whisper of her. Let's sit in that chamber a while longer. The fire is still glowing. A rain has begun to patter outside, soft and steady like fingertips on lace. You can hear the slow creak of the chateau's old beams, settling like an old cat stretching on a warm ledge. Isabeau is brushing her hair, 100 strokes, always 100. She hums a song from her childhood, something about snowflakes falling into warm milk. She isn't thinking of politics, not tonight. Not of the war outside, nor the angry letters from priests. She's thinking of a letter she received that morning from a knight in Burgundy. It wasn't written in ink, but in clove oil. When she unfolded the paper, the scent rose up to meet her. He wrote only 4 words, "Your breath haunts me." Later that night, they say, she wore only her perfume and a fox fur cloak when she went walking in the south wing. That wing no longer exists. It burned. But the tale lingers, like smoke trapped in old velvet. And so, as the wind picks up outside the tower and the hearth settles into a low, embered hush, let yourself fall deeper into the quiet, into the warmth of her secret world. The figs on her table have been halved, their insides glistening. Her cup is empty, her lips are stained berry red, and somewhere behind the heavy oak cabinet door, that drawer rests, locked, waiting, a rose tucked gently beside its hinge. Now, let your thoughts drift softly away from St. Paul, into the hills beyond, where another queen stirs in her bed, tossing, dreaming, plotting. Imagine a corridor lit only by the warm flicker of beeswax candles. The walls here are smooth marble, veined like milk swirled in dark coffee. You're walking, slowly, across chilled tiles, your footsteps muffled by thick red rugs. There's a scent in the air, lavender, sandalwood, and something else, musk, ancient and sweet like a memory trapped in silk. We are no longer in France, now we're in Naples. The year is 1345. The sea is close. You can hear the waves even from here, murmuring softly against the palace walls like an old song repeating itself. Outside, orange trees drop fruit into the grass. Inside, a queen is brushing oil through her long, heavy hair, one strand at a time. Her name is Joanna Furs of Naples. They called her many things, but never boring. And tonight, she's staring into a velvet-framed mirror, the only one of its kind in the kingdom. It wasn't made of glass, not yet. No, this mirror was made from polished obsidian, volcanic glass from the slopes of Vesuvius. It reflected only shadows and outlines, never the full truth. Joanna liked it that way. She said it was the only mirror that didn't lie to her. Now, lean back. Let the air grow warmer around you. Naples at night smells of lemon peel and warm stone. Somewhere nearby, a musician is plucking a lute lazily, like he has all the time in the world. He probably does. Joanna didn't. She'd been crowned queen at just 17 after her grandfather's mysterious death. Some said poison, others whispered sorcery. She ruled fiercely, but not alone. Her first husband, Andrew of Hungary, had a heart too small and a tongue too loose. He laughed at her mirror, called it a witch's plate. 2 weeks later, his body was found hanging from a garden trellis, or so the story goes. Some say Joanna had nothing to do with it. Others say she watched. But let's not trouble ourselves with murder tonight. Let's stay in this moment, inside her chamber. Joanna is tasting something sweet now, a candied chestnut soaked in rosewater and crushed almonds. It's soft, slightly grainy, dissolving on her tongue like sugar in tea. A favourite treat of hers. She liked them warm, served on silver trays lined with fig leaves. Her taste in food mirrored her taste in lovers. Soft, fragrant, unexpected. She didn't believe in duty without delight, and in a palace like this, carved into stone touched by sea air, there were always corners for pleasure to hide in. Alcoves behind curtains, secret stairwells that led nowhere, baths that stayed warm till morning. One such bath, they say, was built just for her, fed by a natural spring beneath the palace, lined with pearl tiles and scented with mint leaves. Servants would pour goat milk into the water, turning it cloudy, rich, a cloak of privacy. She often bathed alone, but not always. An ambassador from Sicily once claimed he was invited to speak with her during one such bath. She was submerged up to her shoulders, hair pinned atop her head, a single gold chain resting between her collarbones. He spoke of politics. She spoke of perfume. He remembered little else. They say he wrote back to his king in trembling Latin, "She is fire, but she smiles like snow." Joanna didn't mind the rumours. She fed them like pets. Once she appeared at a feast in a gown made entirely of swan feathers. Her hair was braided with silver thread, and she wore no shoes. Some thought it scandalous. Others thought it divine. The church naturally had opinions. They always do. A cardinal once sent her a letter of warning. Too much flesh, too many lovers, too many baths, he said. She returned his letter sealed with a kiss, and a sample of her favourite fig soap. Now tell me, how can you not dream of her? Picture her walking barefoot through the inner gardens at midnight, her silk robe trailing behind her like spilled cream, the moonlight slipping across her bare arms. Her favourite flower was the orange blossom. She claimed its scent reminded her of childhood, or maybe of something far more private. She kept a diary. It was hidden in a hollowed-out book of psalms. Inside were sketches, delicate, precise, of hands, lips, feet, descriptions of dreams that didn't end with sleep. One entry spoke of a night who smelled like firewood and salt. Another described a kiss given underwater. We don't know who found the diary after her death, but pieces of it survived, copied, translated, smuggled between pages of other books. There's a line. Maybe you'll remember it. A mouth can be more honest than a sword if it's not afraid to linger. Let that settle with you for a while. Outside, the sea hums. The sky is soft with clouds. Joanna lies on her bed now, alone but not lonely. She's turned her mirror toward the window. She likes to watch the night reflected. The candle beside her flutters. She closes her eyes, but her lips still hold a smile. And far below, in the kitchens, a pan of honeyed pears begins to cool. Everything in her world ends with sweetness. Now, let your mind follow the breeze drifting through that obsidian-framed mirror, through the corridors of marble and thyme-scented air, out into the next story. Another queen waits. She too has secrets. Close your eyes with me for a moment and listen. Can you hear the low hum of the Baltic winds? There's a salty chill in the air, drifting over pine forests and frozen lakes, sweeping toward a castle with amber walls that glow like captured sunlight. We're in Poland now, in the year 1386, and the queen who waits for us is Jadwiga, though most called her simply the Holy Queen. Holy, but not dull. She wasn't like other queens. Her voice was soft, almost musical, and her heart was full of kindness. But she also had a quiet fire. She had been crowned king, yes, king, because no one dared place her beneath a man's title. Yet when you peek into her private chambers, you find the same traces of longing that any young woman of 17 might have. Her bed smelled faintly of beeswax and lilacs, and on her desk sat a single amber cup. That cup wasn't just for drinking, it was her secret charm. She believed amber, warm and glowing, carried whispers of the sea, that it trapped not only ancient air but also ancient dreams. When she sipped honeyed mead from that cup, she said it made her feel close to the sun. Maybe it wasn't just the mead. Imagine her now, sitting by the fire, wearing a wool gown trimmed with ermine. Outside, snow is falling, soft and steady like flour through a sieve. The castle windows fog gently with the warmth of the hearth. She dips her spoon into a bowl of spiced porridge, millet, butter, and just a hint of cinnamon, a rare spice brought up from Venice. She takes slow bites, savouring each one as if it's a poem. There's something soothing about watching someone eat in silence, isn't there? It's like seeing the world pause. Jadwiga would often invite her ladies to sit by the fire after dinner, their skirts fanned out like petals, and she'd hum old songs from her childhood. The hums were so low and rhythmic they'd lull even the boldest knight into a quiet trance. But here's the thing about Jadwiga. While people worshipped her for her piety, behind the walls she was far more human. Her heart was tangled between politics and passion. You see, she was once betrothed to William of Austria, a young man who adored her and sent her letters folded like tiny swans. But the marriage was broken, replaced by duty. She was to marry Hagiello, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, a much older man, a political alliance, and yet. There were nights when she'd sit at her writing desk, holding one of William's swan-folded letters, tracing the creases with her finger. A single tear, perhaps, would fall onto the parchment, blurring the ink. Her maid would find her like that, staring into the fire, the amber cup beside her untouched. It was said that on the night before her wedding, she slipped out of the castle, walking barefoot through the snow to the chapel. She prayed not for herself, but for peace, for strength, for the courage to love a man she barely knew. People like to make saints out of such moments, but I like to think that when she prayed, she also whispered to the universe, "I am still me, I will not forget." Her favourite treat? Oh, I think you'll like this. She adored honey cakes, thick, soft, golden, with just a dusting of crushed nuts, the kind that stick to your teeth just enough to remind you they were worth it. There's a story that once during Lent she had the kitchen bake a batch for the poor of Krakow. She didn't taste a single one, but you could tell she wanted to by the way she inhaled the scent, eyes closed, smiling like a girl again. The kitchens at Wawel Castle were always warm and loud, with cauldrons bubbling and wooden spoons clattering. Jadwiga liked to sneak down there sometimes, just to sit near the ovens and talk with the cooks. "What are you making?" she'd ask, and they'd tell her about dumplings stuffed with wild mushrooms, or roasted fish with dill and lemon. Imagine her there, perched on a wooden stool, skirt tucked under her feet, nibbling on a leftover dumpling like it was the closest thing to happiness. And perhaps it was. Her love story with Hagiello eventually became something tender, but at first it was like pouring cold water over hot iron. Awkward, tense, hissing. He was rough around the edges, used to hunting in the forests, not to dancing under candlelight. She taught him the ways of court life, of poetry, of slow meals and softer smiles. And maybe, just maybe, he taught her how to laugh without worrying about who was watching. Late at night, when the castle had gone still, she'd slip into the chapel alone. The stone floor was cold beneath her feet, but she didn't mind. She'd light a single candle and whisper secrets to the silence, dreams she never wrote down. She'd ask for signs, for quiet answers. Sometimes she'd leave a honey cake on the altar, a tiny offering for the saints, or maybe just for herself. Now, as the snow deepens outside and the fire in her room burns low, Jadwiga pulls a fur-lined blanket around her shoulders. She sips from her amber cup, tasting the warmth, the sweetness, the slow fade of winter's bite. She closes her eyes. The world outside, cold, political, demanding, will wait. For now, she's simply a girl in a castle holding on to warmth. And as we slip out of that amber-lit room, we follow the soft wind across the rooftops, toward another queen, another tale, another flavour of history waiting to unfold. Do you hear that? Not the usual crackle of firewood, but the soft rustle of silks, whispering together like secrets passed in candlelight. There's music somewhere. Pluck strings, slow, thoughtful, the kind of tune that doesn't try too hard, that just exists, like perfume clinging to velvet. We're in England now, the year 1445, and the queen we're about to meet? Well, Margaret of Anjou, a woman whose name echoed through the corridors of war and scandal. But tonight she's not wearing her armour of diplomacy. Tonight we find her alone, standing by a stained glass window, eating a peach. Not just any peach. This one is pale gold, tender-skinned, imported from Gascony in a little wooden box cushioned in hay. When she bites into it, soft, deliberate, the juice slides down her wrist, and she doesn't even flinch. She lets it drip, slowly, watching it catch the moonlight. Can you feel that stillness? It's the kind you only get in the quietest hour of the night, when the servants are asleep, the halls are silent, and the air tastes faintly of summer dust and old stone. Margaret was not known for sweetness, but people forget. Queens are only ever remembered in extremes. They're either saints or villains, never both. She was young when she married Henry VI, who was so gentle he'd barely swat a fly, and so withdrawn he sometimes forgot to speak for days. Margaret was not like that. She came from Anjou with fire in her eyes and a collection of dresses that left English ladies blushing behind their fans. She wore colours that hadn't yet been named, crimson like drying blood, green like envy steeped in honey, and she never once apologised. Now, walk with me, down the corridor, past the tapestries showing knights and battles, toward her private study. It smells of lavender oil and lemon ink. An odd mix, yes, but unmistakably hers. She writes letters here, hundreds, each one tucked with dried petals or spritzed with perfume. She signs them with a single red M and a wax seal shaped like a thorn. A maid once said she kept two kinds of ink on her desk, black for diplomacy, red for vengeance. Margaret had favourites, not just among her courtiers or poets, but among spices, fruits, even candles. She once had an entire shipment of cinnamon candles sent from Spain, burned one every night while she bathed, said the scent made her feel untouchable, and when she bathed she preferred milk mixed with orange blossom water. The tub was copper, the towels, imported linen embroidered with tiny gold bees. She'd lie there, eyes closed, humming old French lullabies, while someone, usually a lady-in-waiting, read aloud from a book of Roman love poetry. Now, pause here. Breathe in. Let that blend of milk, orange, cinnamon and honey drift into your thoughts. Back to the peach. Why the peach? There's a story. Late one summer, when the court was heavy with heat and rumours, she was gifted a small orchard tree by a young lord from Kent. He was barely 20, known for writing poems in chalk on the castle's stone walls. A romantic, little foolish. She accepted the gift, planted the tree herself, watered it daily for a week, then had it moved near her bedroom window. When it bore its first fruit, she named one of the peaches after him. That same year the boy disappeared. Some say he joined the war, others claim he was exiled. A few whisper he was found, drowned in the moat, with a piece of parchment clutched in his hand that simply said, "Your mouth was worth the risk." Margaret never spoke of him, but the tree remained. Even in winter she'd walk past it, pausing just long enough for her fingers to brush the bark. Once a servant swore he saw her kiss one of the blossoms in spring. Somewhere inside this sharp steel woman lived a girl who believed in poems. Her indulgence? Not just peaches. She had a particular craving for sweet custards. Thick, golden, spiced with nutmeg. The kind that coats your tongue and makes you forget what season it is. She'd take them in the morning before prayer, a bold move, and she never ate them with a spoon, only with a wedge of bread. Better that way, she once said. The sweetness deserves to be earned. When Henry's madness deepened, when he began to see angels and speak in riddles, Margaret ruled in his place, with quiet ruthlessness. Her enemies mocked her for being too French, too loud, too ambitious. But the truth is, she was tired of being small, tired of folding herself up to fit someone else's throne. At night, after the council had gone, she'd sit by the fire with a cup of spiced wine, her gown unbuttoned at the collar, her hair loosened. A lute player in the corner strumming something low, repetitive, the kind of sound that barely touches your ears but coils into your spine. One of her ladies described these moments as watching a storm remember it was once a cloud. She wasn't cruel, but she'd stopped waiting for permission. Now, as you rest with me in this flickering candlelit room, imagine her there. Peach pit resting in her palm, thumbs slowly tracing the curve of it. Her eyes half closed, a letter burning quietly in the hearth behind her. She's humming a tune no one else knows, and as we slowly close the door, leaving her in that golden pool of firelight and moon glow, let the scent of warm fruit and spiced custard follow us, out into the night, across the fields, where another queen sleeps with a dagger beneath her pillow and a secret smile on her lips. Let's drift there next. Come close now, closer still. Let's leave the cold stones of England behind and follow the heat. Down winding roads scented with myrrh and orange blossom, past caravans heavy with spice, until we arrive in Granada. The year is 1490. The shadows are long, the dusk lavender blue, and the air thick with the perfume of almond trees and incense. There's music in the courtyards, soft strums of an oud echo beneath arched ceilings painted with stars. Marble fountains trickle like whispers, and the wind carries laughter wrapped in silk. This is Al-Andalus, and within the Alhambra's red walls lives a queen whose name was spoken both with reverence and caution. Aixa, the Moorish queen, the mother of Boabdil, the last sultan of Granada. But tonight she's not a mother, not a politician, not a symbol of resistance. Tonight she's alone in her bath chamber, steam curling around her like lazy smoke, her back arched against warm tiles as a servant pours rosewater over her shoulders. Can you hear that water? The way it falls in rhythm. The sound alone could put a tired soul to sleep. Aixa was said to bathe for hours, slowly, luxuriously, until her fingers puckered and her skin carried the scent of flowers for days. She believed in ritual, in beauty, in turning every private moment into something sacred. She had oils from Damascus, salts from the Dead Sea, clays from the desert, the colour of blush. But most of all, she prized the silks, those impossibly light, whisper-thin silks that came from the East. They weren't worn in public. No, these were the secret garments, the kind meant to be felt, not seen. And Aixa? She wore them like armour. After her bath, she'd be wrapped in one, soft mint green or dusty pink, then led to her garden where she'd sip hot milk and chew candied sesame seeds, watching the moon rise behind the cypress trees. The garden smelled of citrus, rose and smoke from nearby cooking fires. And from her favourite corner she could see the whole city glowing in gold lantern light. This garden was her escape, her empire. Even as Christian armies closed in around Granada, Aixa kept her nights sacred. She knew what was coming, the surrenders, the betrayals, the inevitable fall. But she didn't flinch. She'd simply light more incense and eat another sugared fig. Did I mention her favourite sweet? It was a strange one. Candied eggplant. Yes, eggplant. Sliced thin, soaked in syrup, then dusted with sesame and cinnamon. It tasted like mystery, like something you weren't supposed to enjoy but did anyway. She said it reminded her of childhood and rebellion, both at once. She'd take a bite slowly, always with her fingers, and close her eyes as if trying to remember something important. A place, a person, a touch. There was a man once, not her husband, not even from Granada, a merchant from Alexandria who brought scrolls and pearls in equal measure. He read her poetry from memory, and once, just once, kissed her palm beneath a hanging lantern in the orange grove. She never spoke his name again after he left. But she burned his letters with sandalwood, carefully, page by page, as if each syllable was a sin too beautiful to keep. Some nights the wind would rattle the palace gates and the guards would whisper of traitors, but Aixa would stay in her bath, unbothered. The warm water made her fearless. She believed a queen could not lose what she had already mourned. And what did she mourn? The silence of old songs, the slow crumbling of her people's power, and the weight of watching her son, Boabdil, surrender the city she had fought to protect. She once told a lady of her court, men lose their swords, women lose everything else. But tonight is before the surrender. Tonight the Alhambra still belongs to her. The air is thick with scent, the sky is velvet, and Aixa lies beneath her silk canopy, bare feet resting on a cushion of crushed rose petals, a bowl of chilled almond cream by her side. There's music playing, soft, slow, hypnotic, and in her hand, a small silver flask. Inside it, a perfume she made herself from ashes and myrtle and citrus peel. She dabs it behind her ears and whispers, "So I'll be remembered." And she is. Even now, in the winding streets of Granada, they tell her story, of the queen who faced 1,000 swords with nothing but silence and silk. As you breathe in now, let that scent of orange blossom and warm sesame carry you deeper into rest. The garden gates are closing behind us, slowly, quietly. And far off, beyond the palace walls, the torches of another empire begin to flicker. But we'll go somewhere else now. Another queen waits, and she's stirring her tea with something far more interesting than sugar. Come with me now, gently, through a swirl of snowflakes that melt the moment they touch your skin. We're heading east, past the rolling steppe beyond the birch forests, until we find a palace glazed with frost and humming with candlelight. We're in Moscow. The year is 1553, and behind these thick oak doors, fur-lined and iron-banded, sits Anastasia Romanovna, the first Tsaritsa of Russia, Ivan the Terrible's wife. But that name, terrible, is misleading, isn't it? It doesn't mean cruel, it means awe-inspiring. Though truthfully, Ivan was both. But Anastasia, she was something else entirely. Let me show you. Inside her chamber it's warm, almost unnaturally so. Thick braziers glow in the corners, burning with pine resin and birch bark. The walls are lined with hand-stitched tapestries, gold and wine-coloured, woven with scenes from ancient folklore. A woman in red dancing with a bear, a prince transformed into a swan, a fox with a jewelled crown, and in the centre of it all, seated on cushions embroidered with garnets and hawks, is the Tsaritsa herself, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. Not just any tea. This was a brew reserved for women of the court. Black leaves brought up through Persia, boiled with honeycomb, orange peel, and a single crushed clove. When the steam rose, it smelled like secrets. Anastasia sipped it slowly, lips barely parted, eyes half-lidded. Her maids knew not to disturb her during these moments. They said she used the steam to dream, to see things others missed. Whispers, betrayals, love letters never sent. She kept a drawer of them, folded into tiny stars. But what she treasured even more was her embroidery frame. Yes, embroidery, needle and thread, but not the kind you're imagining. She stitched scenes not from the Bible, but from dreams. Vivid, strange dreams. A crow flying over a city of mirrors, a child sleeping in the snow, untouched by frost. Her favourite piece showed a woman seated at a banquet, surrounded by wolves dressed as nobles. She claimed it came from a dream she had the night before her wedding. A warning, perhaps, or just dinner with Ivan. And yet, she loved him, at least at first. He was intense, unpredictable, violent when provoked, but when he was with her, he softened. He wrote her poems in candle soot on scraps of birch bark. He kissed her hands with reverence, like she was made of glass and prophecy. He even refused to eat unless she tasted his food first, not for fear of poison, but for pleasure. "Your mouth knows better than mine," he once said. "Let's slow down here. Take a breath." The tea is cooling slightly, the honey settling into the bottom of the cup. The scent is stronger now, rich, dark like the forest after rain. Anastasia reaches for a treat. Pryaniki, Russian honey cake spiced with pepper and dipped in icing. Firm on the outside, soft and sweet within, she bites into one, eyes fluttering closed. That's the moment I want you to remember. Not the politics, not the crown, just that small human moment. A woman wrapped in woolen velvet biting into a warm honey cake, the sound of snow ticking against the windows like tiny fingernails. She once said, "Let the world burn if it must, but give me sweetness first." She meant it. During times of unrest, while Ivan's court argued over bloodlines and betrayals, she would retreat to her solarium. It had a glass ceiling, rare in those days, which let her watch the snow fall directly above her. She'd lie there, wrapped in ermine, pressing her palm to the cold glass, wondering where the flakes had been before they reached her. Sometimes Ivan would join her there. He'd lay his head in her lap like a boy and ask her to sing. Her voice was low, smoky, more whisper than melody. She sang of rivers and wolves, of women who walked into lakes and came out as clouds, and sometimes she'd sing of fire. She kept fire with her always, not just in the hearth but in her perfume, distilled from smoked cedar, dried rose, and something no one could quite name. It smelled like warmth and warning, like a storm wrapped in silk. But the fire eventually found her. Historians will say she died of illness. Others say poison. Some say Ivan wept for days, others say he raged, smashing every vase she ever touched, tearing her tapestries with a knife until they bled thread and dust. But the truth? Well, maybe it's softer. Maybe on her last night she drank her tea slowly, savouring every note. Maybe she embroidered one final stitch, a hidden fox curled in sleep. Maybe the snow whispered her name, and maybe, just maybe, she went dreaming into the dark, wrapped in song and silk and smoke. And now, you. Yes, you. Let that warmth rest against your skin. Feel the softness of her world, so distant, so textured. The pine smoke, the honey, the sound of Ivan pacing just outside the chamber door, muttering love and war in the same breath. But you're safe here. As her tea cools and her final tapestry hangs untouched, we'll drift onward, through the cold, across frozen rivers, into the torchlight of another palace. Another queen waits, and this one is wearing armour. Settle in again. Let the night settle into your bones, soft and still like snow resting on the shoulders of statues. The fire hums low, just enough to warm your fingertips. The scent of something roasted, almonds, cloves, lingers in the corners of your imagination. Let's go now to Hungary. The year is 1522, and in the candlelit halls of Buda Castle, past the stained glass windows and the potted rosemary trees, lives a woman they once called the Rose of the Danube. A woman with eyes like flint and a tongue like the edge of a well-kept dagger. Queen Mary of Habsburg. A queen made of contradictions, sweet-faced, soft-voiced, but known to hide knives in her corsets, literally. And before you raise your eyebrows, remember, this was a time when being clever was not enough. Not when you were surrounded by men in feathered hats who smiled while plotting your exile. So Mary didn't just learn to read Cicero and dance like a court swan. She learned how to slip steel between lace. She was married to King Louis II, a boy king who liked falconry, honey wine, and pretending wars would go away if you simply stopped mentioning them. Mary, on the other hand, liked control, strategy, order, and pickled cherries. Yes, that was her favourite indulgence. Sticky, sour, sweet cherries soaked in spiced wine and sealed in glass jars imported from Bohemia. She kept one hidden under her bed for emergencies. Her ladies-in-waiting said she'd spoon them onto her tongue with her eyes closed, like she was tasting a memory too dangerous to say aloud. You can imagine her now, sitting in her winter robe of cream velvet, hair unbraided for the night, a single cherry between her fingers. The juice stains her fingertips like ink. Outside, snow gathers on the balcony ledges, and the wind slaps the shutters with a soft rhythm, reminding her that soon the Ottomans will arrive. 'Cause they always arrive. But tonight is not for war. Tonight is for silk sheets and hidden steel. Let me tell you a secret. Mary once had a gown made entirely from imported Florentine satin, deep green, laced up the back like a violin. The twist. Hidden between the folds of the bodice, stitched into the inner lining, was a sheath just large enough to hold a narrow blade. It was custom, made in secret by a bladesmith who once owed her brother a favour. No one knew she wore it, not even Louis. She claimed it made her feel safe. I think it made her feel alive. And when the court dined, beneath chandeliers strung with wax-dripped antlers and roasted boar served on trenches of stale bread, Mary sat still, silent, tasting her food slowly. Saffron soup, goose glazed with orange, a warm almond tart, all while listening, and she always listened. One ambassador said she had the stare of a woman measuring your coffin while smiling at your tie. But she wasn't cruel. No, cruelty is clumsy. Mary was precise. Even her bedtime routines had order. At exactly the same hour, she'd dismiss her attendants, extinguish 5 of the 6 candles herself, and read a psalm, always aloud, always slowly, always in Latin. And then she'd run her fingers along the spine of a book bound in black leather, her thumb finding the seam that opened to reveal a small compartment inside. What was hidden there? Well, accounts say it changed often, sometimes a letter, sometimes a pressed violet, sometimes a ring, once a tooth. Let's not dwell. She was deeply religious, but she never confused piety with submission. In fact, she believed obedience without thought was a sin. God gave us minds, she once said, so we'd sharpen them, not bow them. Her prayers were honest, sometimes angry. She would pray for peace, but also for resilience. She prayed that her hands would remain steady and her mind sharp. Louis, meanwhile, slept like a child, wrapped in silk, dreaming of hunting dogs and imaginary conquests. Mary would watch him sleep sometimes, spooning cherry preserve into her mouth, letting it sit on her tongue, unswallowed, just watching. And when the fire dipped too low, she'd rise, place her bare feet on the cold tile and walk to the window. Always the same one, always facing east, toward the future, toward the threat, toward what was coming. She never flinched. When battle finally came, at Mohatch, Louis fled and drowned in retreat. Mary did not weep, not then. Instead, she dressed in her thickest black wool, pulled her blade from its sheath, and wrote letters. Not eulogies, plans. Later, she would be known as the woman who built an empire without raising her voice. But here, in this moment, she's just a girl in a fortress, standing by candlelight, licking cherry juice from her thumb and thinking of the best way to survive a world full of men who underestimate her. And now, so softly it feels like a sigh, let's step away. Let her rest. The room dims, the candle flickers its final flicker. Outside, the wind moves on, and far to the west, another queen is dipping her fingers into ink, writing letters that will never be sent. Her corset laced a little too tightly, her breath shallow with secrets. Let's go to her. The light here is different. Soft, golden, almost thick, as if someone melted sunlight into syrup and poured it across the floor. We're in Florence now. The year is 1478, and the Renaissance is humming in every corner, marble statues, frescoes, lute strings vibrating in slow rhythms. Even the shadows are graceful. In a room above a perfumery, draped in sheer curtains that flutter like sighs, sits Clarice Orsini, noblewoman, poet, and the wife of Lorenzo de' Medici. You might know him, banker, ruler, patron of Michelangelo, but this story, it belongs to Clarice, and tonight she's alone, dressed in a thin linen shift, her feet bare against tiled floors cool from the evening breeze. She holds a letter in her mouth, not between her fingers, in her mouth. Why? Because she doesn't want to read it. Not yet. She wants to taste it first. The parchment, sealed with wax-tinted blue, is scented faintly of crushed violet and something else. Clove oil, maybe. It was slipped to her by a page with trembling hands. No return address, no emblem, no clue, except the words Perte written on the back. Clarice had many admirers, but this one felt dangerous. She presses the letter between her tongue and the roof of her mouth, letting the taste of ink and beeswax bloom. She closes her eyes. The room is silent except for the distant sound of a street musician playing something slow and aching. You can almost hear the cobblestones breathing beneath his feet. Clarice always said she could tell a man's intentions by the flavour of his words. Sweet letters often meant nothing, but the ones that stung slightly, those were real. She was raised in Rome, trained in philosophy and Latin, taught not just how to curtsy, but how to compose her own verses. Lorenzo fell for her mind, though her figure didn't hurt. She was known for walking through the Uffizi gardens barefoot, balancing a book on her head and quoting Ovid to passing sculptors. But her mind, that was the weapon. Let me take you into her study. Small, candlelit and cluttered with scrolls, there's a dish of sugared almonds on the windowsill, a pitcher of cool rose water, and most unusually, a bowl of figs soaked in wine. She preferred them before bed, said the taste helped her remember dreams more clearly. Let's pause there. Figs soaked in wine. Imagine biting into one, skin barely holding shape, flesh dark as velvet, seeds crackling faintly as you chew. The wine has seeped into every cell, every fibre. It's not a fruit anymore. It's a confession. Clarice would eat one, slowly, then press her fingers to her lips as if sealing a thought inside. She had notebooks too, pages of unwritten poems scratched out in the margins of her husband's ledgers, sonnets written backward so the servants wouldn't snoop. One maid claimed she found a stanza hidden behind the fireplace brick. It read, "I live between ink and fire, where men write checks and women disappear." She knew how the game worked. She knew how men saw her, a Medici wife, dutiful, charming, devout. But at night she would unlatch that window and lean out over the street, whispering her poems to the air, hoping the wind would carry them to someone who understood. And someone did. That letter, the one under her tongue, it was from a painter, a quiet one, not famous, not yet. He painted her once by accident. She was watching her husband pose for a portrait, sitting in the back eating a pear, not even looking at the canvas, but he painted her anyway, from memory. Later he sent her the painting unsigned along with a small vial of perfume, ambergris and lemon. She never acknowledged it, but she wore the scent every Thursday. Their letters were irregular, coded. Sometimes only a single phrase. The moon knows. Or, he looked but didn't see. One time, he sent her a miniature of a nightingale with no wings. She understood exactly what he meant. They never touched. But that didn't matter. Intimacy lived in the restraint. At night, Clarice would lie back in her bed, legs tangled in linen, a single fig placed carefully on her chest like a stone on a grave. She'd let it sit there, cold, and imagine the weight of his gaze, not touching, just watching, listening. Sometimes Lorenzo would call her from the other room, his voice full of wine and politics, and she'd snap back into her role, dutiful, warm. But the figs never tasted the same after that. Now, as the candle burns lower and the street music fades into silence, Clarice removes the letter from her mouth. She doesn't open it. She places it gently into a drawer lined with velvet and slips into bed facing the window. The breeze smells of jasmine and burning olive oil. She whispers a line of her own poetry into the dark. Some fires ask not to be fed. Then sleep finds her, or perhaps she finds sleep, like a coin slipped beneath a door. And we too drift out of her room, through the lace-curtained window, into the Florentine night, where another queen, far from these marble halls, is dipping her fingers into something colder. Ink? Blood? Hard to say. Let's follow. Come, let's move farther south now, across the Mediterranean, where the air gets thicker with spice, and the nights last just a little longer. We are in the city of Cairo, in the year 977, when the Fatimid dynasty was rising like a golden lion stretching into power. The streets are labyrinths of scent, cumin, roasted lamb, sandalwood, and dates cooked in honey. The stars feel closer here, like you could reach up and crush them between your fingers. And deep inside the palace, behind a lattice window carved so finely it looks like lace, lives Queen Dura, a woman whose name was lost in many books but whispered in every bathhouse and bakery. They called her Al-Zahra, the Shining One, and not just because of her jewellery. No, Dura glowed because she wanted to. Now close your eyes. Can you hear the rustle of fabric dragged across marble floors? The soft click of sandals against cool stone? That's her. She moves like poured molasses, slow, deliberate, heavy with meaning. She never speaks above a murmur, and yet everyone leans in. She keeps her chambers dark and scented. Always. 100 oil lamps line the walls, each filled with different fragrance. Amber, oud, rose. Burned separately, one per day depending on her mood. Today, myrrh. Heavy, sharp. The kind of scent that makes your heart beat slow. Now picture her reclining. The cushions beneath her are stuffed with duck feathers and perfumed with clove. Her dress is gauzy, translucent, threaded with gold wire so thin it shimmers like sunlight dancing on water. She's not cold. She never is. In front of her sits a tray the size of a carriage wheel, and on that tray, the kind of feast that makes the gods jealous. Spiced pigeon stuffed with pine nuts and cinnamon, grapes soaked in wine and rolled in crushed pistachios, cubes of lamb grilled with apricot glaze, and her favourite sweet cheese wrapped in pastry drizzled with honey and rosewater. She doesn't eat quickly. No, every bite is a meditation. She takes a single fig, black-skinned and warm, and presses it between her fingers until it splits open. The insides glisten, seeds shimmer. She holds it to her lips and waits. She always waits. Why? Because the curtain in the corner has shifted, and behind it, he stands. A poet, a slave, a spy. Maybe all three. She let him into her world not with permission, but with silence. Silence that meant yes. Silence that meant come closer, but only if you dare. He doesn't speak, neither does she, but their eyes, those tell everything. She gestures to the food and he kneels, not beside her, not across, but behind. He feeds her pieces with fingers that tremble more than they should. She licks honey from his knuckles, then closes her eyes again. Outside the lattice window, Cairo breathes. A camel bell jingles in the distance. Someone laughs in a nearby courtyard. Somewhere, someone is being married. Somewhere else, someone is being sentenced. But here, time has stopped. Dura was not a queen in the traditional sense. She held no crown, no title etched in stone. She was the favoured wife of the caliph, yes, but also his tormentor, his mirror, his shadow, his secret. She wrote poetry that could not be published. Too sensual, too dangerous. She described the curve of lips, the way sweat tasted when mixed with pomegranate seeds. She once wrote, "I want to die between the pulse and the pause." Her poems were hidden, sewn into the hems of curtains, painted into the borders of carpets, recited only in steam rooms and under moonlight, when women untied their hair and told the truth. Dura never lied, she simply edited. Her bath was filled each evening with goat milk, crushed hibiscus petals, and mint. She soaked for hours, letting the colour of her skin deepen, until it matched the shadows of the palace floor. She did not fear darkness, she became it. She once told a servant, "Beauty is not light, it's hunger, what you can never fully taste." And yet she kept trying. Back to the poet. He once brought her a dish she'd never tasted, a date stuffed with almond paste, rolled in cinnamon and dipped in rose jam. She took one bite and asked, "Is this what you think I taste like?" He never answered, and he didn't have to. Later that night he was gone. No one ever found him. No one ever dared ask. But the next day Dura requested that same dessert again, and every night after, she kept a single piece wrapped in cloth and placed beside her pillow, just in case he returned. Now the room quiets. The tray is empty. The lamps burn low. Dura unpins her hair, a slow waterfall of ink-black silk spilling down her spine. She hums a song without melody, a sound so old it might be the voice of the wind itself. She lies down on her cushions, and the last thing she does before sleep, she tastes the date, lets the sweetness melt on her tongue, and dreams of fire and fig and forbidden words whispered through the lattice window. We'll leave her there now, in the dark, in the silence, where memory and pleasure fold into each other like silk on skin, and somewhere, far to the north, a woman wrapped in fur and guilt is about to pour something bitter into a goblet. We'll visit her next. The cold here is different. It doesn't bite, it lingers, clings to the corners of cloaks, hides beneath fingernails, settles into stone like it belongs there. We're in Sweden, the year is 1632, and the lakes are frozen mirrors beneath the sky. The sun barely rises, the days melt into blue-tinted dusk, and even firelight feels shy. Inside a towering grey palace, warmed only by fur rugs and pride, walks Queen Christina, a monarch who ruled like a man, dressed like a soldier, and read philosophy like a priest. But tonight she's not reading. She's pouring something into a goblet. Carefully, quietly. Let me take you there. The room smells of iron and smoke. Not the sweet scent of wood smoke, this is sharper. A fire that has burned too long. There's a chill despite the flames, and Queen Christina stands in the centre of it all, a heavy robe falling from one shoulder, her eyes shadowed with thoughts she won't speak aloud. She's holding a silver goblet, engraved with tiny wolves chasing each other around the rim. It was a gift from a Hungarian count who once offered her an army and a poem. She took the goblet and rejected the rest. Inside it tonight is not wine, it's wormwood tea, bitter, dark, infused with fennel, mint and secrets. A court physician gave her the recipe. He claimed it sharpened the senses and dulled the appetite for sin. Christina laughed in his face. But she drank it anyway. You can almost taste it now, can't you? That metallic edge. That strange tingle that creeps across the tongue and settles in the spine. She drinks slowly, eyes fixed on the frost gathering along the window. She's thinking of her cousin. He was young, beautiful, good at pretending not to love her. They played chess together every Sunday. She always won, except once. That night she kissed him, nothing more, but something less than nothing too. It never happened again, but she kept the chessboard. It sits under her bed. Her favourite snack, you'd never guess. Salted licorice. Black, chewy, pungent. Strange taste, sharp, earthy, unforgiving. She ate it when she felt nervous, or bored, or about to make a decision that could break someone. There's a little tin box of it on her desk now. Gold-edged, dented at the corner, stolen from a Danish merchant who made the mistake of flirting too openly. She never gave it back. Christina didn't care for gowns, not really, but she adored cloaks. The heavier the better. Velvet lined with wolf fur, dark blue with silver embroidery, hoods deep enough to hide whole emotions. Her favourite had a hidden pocket sewn into the inner seam just big enough to hold one letter. And that's where she keeps it. The letter. Unopened, unsent, unread. It came from Rome, from a cardinal. One who knew her through books and rumours. He called her a soul disguised as royalty. Invited her to convert, to visit, to confess. She never replied. But she folded the letter into thirds, slowly, precisely, and kept it close. Like a wound she didn't want to heal. Now imagine this. The candles flicker. The wind howls through the cracks in the stone walls. Somewhere far below, a servant drops a pan and the clang echoes like a bell underwater. But Christina does not move. She's writing now. Not letters, not laws, a single line, on a page torn from a Latin Bible. God made me strange for a reason. She puts down the quill, takes another sip from the goblet, lets the wormwood do its work. She'd been offered many things, husbands, thrones, saints. She said no to all of them. But there was one thing she never refused. Silence. The kind you earn, the kind that falls when no one expects it. That quiet between answers, the wait between decisions. At night she would walk alone through the palace corridors, boots echoing like drum beats. She wore no jewellery, she hated its cling. But she did wear a ring, iron, plain, made from a broken sword. She twisted it when she lied, and she lied often, but not tonight. Tonight she's alone. She finishes her tea, picks up a piece of licorice, and closes her eyes. She doesn't sleep easily, but when she does, she dreams of cities she's never seen, names she's never spoken, lovers she never touched. Her dreams are vast, cold, clean, like marble statues left in snow. She once whispered to her maid, "I don't want to be remembered. I want to be misunderstood." And she was, and still is. Now, let the goblet fall silent. Let the last ember flicker out. Let Christina drift, wrapped in fur and regret beneath painted ceilings and dust-laced tomes. And let's leave her there, because far away in a warmer place a queen is pressing sugar into a lemon, her fingers sticky, her breath held. Shall we? The sun in Naples doesn't rise. It spills. It pools into windowsills, creeps along tiled floors, and settles into the folds of linen like gold dust. It's warm, yes, but not heavy. There's always a breeze here, even in August. The kind of breeze that carries salt and citrus, drifting through the orange groves and into the courtyards of Queens. Inside the palazzo, high on the hill above the bay, a woman sits in a chair made for silence. High-backed, curved like a cradle, velvet worn smooth from years of shifting. She holds a lemon in her lap. Not a common one. This lemon was picked from her private grove. Small, thick-skinned, slightly sweet. She rolls it slowly in her palm, fingers tracing every bump and scar on its surface. Her name is Joanna II of Naples, and though the kingdom still technically answers to her, she hasn't read a dispatch in weeks. Not because she's unwell, not because she's uninterested, because she's waiting. She always waits. The lemon skin is slightly warm from the sun, and she presses her thumb into it just enough to release a soft spray of oil. The air fills instantly with that clean, sharp brightness, like something being made new again. Next to her, a table rests beneath a lazy fan of palm leaves. On the table, a small gold locket, unlatched, half open, the hinge barely holding. Inside, instead of a portrait, a folded piece of cloth, a torn ribbon, green silk with one stitch undone. She doesn't look at it now. She doesn't need to. She knows it by touch. She'd worn that ribbon the night she met him, a court musician barely older than her Chamberlain son, with hands that smelled of rosin and sweat. He played for her birthday, never looked up once, until he did. They only spoke 5 times, no one ever noticed. But she kept the ribbon, pulled from her own sleeve, handed to him on a whim, or maybe as proof that the moment was real. She never saw him again. She told her attendants it had torn while dancing, no one questioned her. Now, years later, the ribbon still smells faintly of tobacco and bergamot. She keeps it close when the world grows loud. She bites the edge of the lemon, breaking the skin, letting the tang stain her lips. A servant nearby shifts but doesn't speak. No one interrupts her citrus rituals. They've learned. She eats it raw, always has. No sugar, no softening, just fruit and fire. Her favourite dessert, one she never shares with guests, is sfogliatella, but only the ones from the convent down the hill. Layers of pastry like rustling parchment, filled with ricotta and lemon zest, served slightly warm. She eats them on Wednesdays, no exceptions, always alone, always barefoot. She believes the soul can't rest if the feet are bound. The locket closes with a soft click. The lemon rests on the table now, half peeled. Her thoughts drift, not back to the musician, not to the ribbon, but to a garden she once walked through as a child. A hedge maze overgrown where she first tasted freedom. That memory lives in her like a flavour. Sweet at first, then bitter, and finally gone. Joanna doesn't write anymore. She dictates, letters that never reach their destination. One to a bishop she once laughed with. One to a soldier who swore he'd never leave. One to a girl in France who shares her name but not her choices. Each sealed in yellow wax lined with a pressed lemon blossom, stamped and stored, not mailed. She says they're safer that way. Her courtiers believe she's gone soft with age, that her mind wanders too far these days. But the truth is quieter, deeper. She's not wandering. She's remembering with precision. She knows what the orange grove smelled like the morning after the council betrayed her. She knows which lace trim she wore when she learned the price of silence. She knows which foot stepped forward first when she chose not to marry again. Left. Always the left. The fan above her slows. Afternoon stretches into amber. The sky outside begins to dip and she rises finally with a long sigh. She picks up the locket and tucks it into a pocket sewn discreetly beneath her gown. The lemon she leaves on the table, half peeled, sweating slightly, still glowing. She walks barefoot across the tiles, the coolness grounding her, her steps silent despite the aching bones. Behind her, the room remains filled with lemon oil and old music. Outside, Naples pulses, and beyond that, someone is writing her name in a book that she will never read. She doesn't mind. She was never meant to be understood by historians, only remembered by ghosts. Now, as the last beam of light slips off the table and the pastry on the tray begins to cool, she disappears into a corridor of scent and shade. And far across the sea, a queen in velvet is opening a cabinet that no one else is allowed to touch. Inside it, something carved from bone and wrapped in red silk. Let's go. The jungle air hangs thick, hot and fragrant like overripe mangoes split open in the sun. Somewhere far beyond the palace walls, monkeys screech playfully in the canopy. But here, inside this vine-draped chamber, there is only hush. We are deep in Goa, and the year is 1511. The Portuguese court has only just begun to unfurl its silk banners along India's coast, and tucked away in a garden pavilion draped in white muslin lives a queen who does not belong to any single world. They call her Beatrice, a half-Portuguese, half-local noblewoman, married to a powerful governor, but whispered about in 24 tongues. She wears the cross around her neck, but henna on her fingertips. She walks barefoot across the marble floor, anklets chiming so softly they sound like secrets. Tonight she's feeding her parrot. Not a dull green bird, no. This parrot is cobalt blue with flecks of orange beneath his wings, and a sharp beak that has tasted cinnamon, figs, and once, only once, gold leaf. He says only one word, again. Beatrice trained him herself. She drops a cube of candied tamarind into his dish and leans back on her silk cushions, the ones embroidered with peacocks and poetry. Her robe slides from one shoulder. Not by accident. Nothing with her ever is. She takes a spoon from a nearby bowl carved from polished coconut shell, filled with thick mango cream dusted with cardamom, and brings it to her lips. The cream is sweet and cold, shocking in the humid night. It melts slowly, and she lets it. Beatrice had no throne, no official title, but she ruled with her scent. Literally. She created her own perfume. Jasmine petals steeped in sandalwood oil, with crushed nutmeg and a drop of real musk. When she entered a room, people turned, no matter what language they spoke. Soldiers, priests, dancers. Even the parrot stopped to listen. Her perfume lingered long after she left, and sometimes so did her influence. They said she never raised her voice, but once convinced a merchant to surrender his ship by simply asking him what kind of wine his wife liked. She believed power wasn't something you showed, it was something you exhaled softly. She wrote letters too, not to kings or cardinals, to women, wives of men in power, daughters of traders, courtesans and cooks. She wrote on palm leaf, folded neatly and bound with threads. Some of her letters were warnings, others were invitations. Many were somewhere in between. No one dared open them in public. Her favourite time of day was just after midnight, when the moon hit the pond outside her chamber just right, making it look like melted pearl. That's when she'd walk through her garden, pressing mango leaves between her fingers, letting the oils coat her skin. She said it helped her dream better. One night she asked a visiting priest if he thought souls had scent. He laughed. She didn't. Then she handed him her scarf. He never laughed again. She had lovers, yes, quiet ones, shadowy ones, the kind you only speak about in metaphors. One was a spice broker from Lisbon. Another, a woman who danced for the court wearing ankle bells and a dagger on each thigh. That one stayed longest. The parrot liked her best. Beatrice once carved a single word into the inside of a sandalwood chest and locked it. The word was closer. No one knew what it meant. But they say, after she died, the perfume she created lingered in her rooms for exactly 12 nights, even though no oil was burned. The 13th night, silence, scentless, as if she'd pulled the air in with her. Now, she lies on her cushions, watching the parrot eat, mango cream softening in her mouth, one bare foot tracing slow circles on the tile. A curtain flutters, a shadow passes. She doesn't look. She doesn't need to. The jungle continues humming, and we gently leave her there. As the cream melts, as the candles dim, as the parrot chirps one last word, again, before tucking its head beneath its wing. Now let's go, to a city where marble glows under moonlight, and a queen is folding a letter into a rose, her tears drying faster than her ink. She's waiting. The air is cooler here, still but full, like something is about to be spoken but never quite is. It smells faintly of dusted parchment, of pressed flowers, and of something floral, something heavy, a blend of musk and roses left out too long in the sun. We are in Constantinople, years before the empire would bend to time. The year is 1450. The city gleams, its domes still shining with divine confidence, the minarets reaching up like pointed fingers brushing the belly of the sky. And in a balcony chamber draped in deep red silks, a woman waits. She is Gulbahar Hatun, consort to a sultan not yet called Magnificent. Her name means spring rose, but nothing about her feels seasonal. She's not fleeting, she's not delicate. She's planted, rooted, watching the empire bloom and decay at once, petal by petal. She sits at her writing table folding a letter. Not the usual way. Not once, not twice, but 12 precise creases tucked into the shape of a rose. A trick she learned from an Andalusian courtier who used to fold poetry into flowers. He taught her that words taste sweeter when they are hidden. Her ink is still wet, the quill resting in a tray shaped like a crescent moon. The message is simple. Only 3 words, and yet enough to start a war. She sprinkles rose dust over the folds. It sticks to the ink. The scent sharpens. She brings it to her nose, inhales once, then sets it aside. Nearby, on a silver tray, rests her favourite indulgence, locum, Turkish delight. Not the pink cloying kind. This one is firm, dark, made with ground pistachios and pomegranate molasses, dusted in crushed rose petals. She takes a small bite, lets it rest on her tongue until it softens. It melts slowly, like a whisper turning into a sigh. She doesn't eat much else these days, not when every meal at court is laced with guessing. Who sits where, who drinks what, who swallows last. So she keeps her treats close, hidden, personal. One piece of locum, wrapped in silk, always tucked inside her sleeve, for comfort, for control. They say Gulbahar never raised her voice, that she only had to blink for the world around her to rearrange. When the Sultan looked at her, he saw storms, but ones he wanted to sail into. She wore blue almost exclusively, said it matched her intentions, and in her hair never jewels, only threads of silver woven into her braids. "Let the sun find me," she said once. "Let the moon decide what's real." She kept a small mirror on her table, not for vanity, for precision. She once wrote that the most dangerous thing in any court wasn't betrayal, but misreading the angle of your own reflection. When she wasn't writing or watching, she embroidered small birds onto the hems of her gowns. Not doves, not peacocks, swifts. Fast, small, clever birds that nest high and vanish when pursued. She said they reminded her of herself. Her chambers were always quiet. No music, no chatter. Just the occasional hush of a page turning, a cup being placed down, a candle fluttering before settling into stillness. Even the fountain in her private garden barely whispered. But still she noticed everything. The cook who began to hum less. The guard whose boots took half a second longer to pause outside her door. The breeze that entered her room colder than it had any right to be. She did not panic. She prepared. And always there were letters. Tucked into books, rolled into her perfume vials, folded into rose petals, then dropped casually into fountains. The one she writes tonight? It won't be read by the Sultan. It will be read by his heir, her son, still a boy but not for long. She doesn't say much, just enough to leave something glowing behind her. A spark, a single match in a palace full of smoke. She places the folded rose into a lacquered box and ties it shut with blue thread. Then she sits back, eats the last of her locum, and reaches for her goblet. It's not wine. It's a syrup made from violet petals and cooled with silvered snow, sweet and strange, with an aftertaste of longing. It coats her tongue, slows her pulse. She doesn't sleep lying down, never has. She sleeps propped upright, against silk pillows, her hair braided, her feet bare, one hand resting near the hilt of a small dagger tucked beneath the cushion. Not because she fears death, but because she wants to greet it standing up, if it comes. Tonight she doesn't sleep at all. She watches the candle melt. She lets the shadows stretch. And when the first call to prayer ripples over the rooftops, she smiles just once. Not because she's devout, not because she's victorious, but because she knows the letter is already gone, and so is the old version of herself. Now, we close the red curtain behind her. Let the scent of roses and pomegranate linger a little longer. Let the cold ink dry. Let the dagger sleep under velvet. And we travel now, softly, gently, to a snowy kingdom where a queen is reading something she should not read, her breath catching on every other word. Shall we find her? The wind outside is silent, but the kind of silence that presses against glass, like it's watching. We're in Denmark, the year is 1610, and the moonlight touches every window pane like a blessing that never asked permission. Snow has gathered in uneven patches along the castle's edge, and inside the highest chamber, curtains drawn, fire low, a queen is staring into a mirror that does not show what she hopes. Queen Anne of Denmark, wife to James VI of Scotland, later James I of England. But here she is neither. She's simply Anne, daughter of Frederick II, sister to 1,000 warnings, and mother to children who may or may not survive the winter. She doesn't wear her crown tonight, just a loose robe lined with ermine falling off one shoulder like an apology. Her feet are bare, curled on a fur rug that still smells faintly of cedar and ash. She holds a mirror, not silver-backed, not gilded, but glass, warped at the edges, the kind you don't find in a royal court but in a drawer meant for someone else. She touches her own reflection like it's a stranger. In front of her, on the table, A tray of caraway cakes, cooled just enough to keep their shape, crumbly at the edges, spiced in a way that bites the tongue before softening. She eats them with small, careful fingers, the way you would peel open a letter you were afraid to read. One cake at a time, one thought at a time. She'd once danced in this very room, gown twirling, musicians playing something too fast and too joyful for the moment. That was before the miscarriages, before the rumours, before her husband started speaking more to his bishops than to her. Anne found comfort in texture. Velvet pressed between her fingers, the cold rim of a pewter goblet, the exact softness of a ripe pear left out too long on the sill. She said once to a visiting duchess, "Faith may fail, but a warm cake never does." She wasn't meant to be pious, she was meant to be powerful. But Denmark trained its daughters for thrones, not confessionals. She didn't kneel, she corrected, and when James asked her to convert to Protestantism, she didn't refuse. She just delayed, for years. Delay, she learned, was its own kind of throne. At night she read books no one else touched, alchemy texts, forbidden treatises, plays not yet performed. One page she folded, read again and again until the paper softened at the edges. It said, "No woman need be seen to rule." She whispered that line under her breath when servants knelt too deeply, or bishops offered counsel she hadn't requested. Her favourite scent was not lavender or rose, it was snow. Fresh, clean, without sweetness. The kind of scent that only lives in silence. She'd stand barefoot on her balcony in winter, letting her breath fog the air, letting the cold crack the stillness inside her. Her ladies would beg her to come in. She wouldn't. Not until her fingers numbed and the fire no longer felt like a reward. Anne kept a diary, but only in her head. Every night before sleep she would mentally list 3 things: what she wanted, what she lost, and what she remembered. Want, safety. Loss, a daughter unnamed. Remember, the way the snow sounded falling into candlelight. Once she attended a feast wearing a gown stitched entirely from pearl-threaded gauze. No corset, no hoops, just her own skin shaped and draped like water. James was furious. She smiled, said, "The church never fed me, the wind always has." She liked to press secrets into wax. Not letters, not scrolls, just slips of silk soaked in ink, rolled tight and sealed with black wax, placed into her jewellery chest among the emeralds. No one ever dared ask. On her quietest nights, she would lay in the snow just outside the chapel, alone, staring at the stars until frost formed along her hairline. When they found her, they wrapped her in wool and scolded her like a child. She never explained. There's a tale that says one night Anne broke every mirror in her chamber except one. When asked why she left one intact, she said, "Because I still need something to fight." Tonight the room is dark but not empty. The fire has collapsed into a nest of soft orange coals. The air smells like caraway and smoke. Her hands are still, resting on her lap. The last cake is untouched. Her reflection in the glass is faint, blurred by breath. And just beneath the bed, hidden in a silk pouch, lies a small object no one knows she owns. A rosary. Not because she believes, because she doesn't know what else to hold. She lies back on the chaise now, robe slipping to the side, her eyes watching the last flame dance, her thoughts quieter than prayer. She does not sleep with her door locked. She does not dream in full sentences. She exhales once, twice, and the mirror fogs. Let it stay fogged. Let her rest. Because not far from here, in a kingdom lit with lanterns and betrayal, another queen has just woken from a dream she swears was a prophecy. And her slippers are already on. The silk rustles before the sound reaches your ear. A breeze pushes past the carved screens, and the lanterns above sway just enough to cast long, trembling shadows across the tiled floor. We're in Kyoto. The year is 1620, and the sky outside is dark with the hush of midnight. Inside a palace lit with warm orange glow, there sits a woman with lacquered hair and unreadable eyes. Her name is Lady Yodogimi, consort of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, mother to the last of a line, and the quiet fire smouldering behind layers of incense and obligation. She doesn't smile, not when she doesn't have to. Her lips are painted red in a perfect still curve, but her eyes tell a different story. They always have. Tonight she's seated cross-legged before a tray of sweets, the kind made only for her, tiny mochi stuffed with red bean and dusted with crushed sakura petals. She eats them slowly, one bite, then a pause. The sweetness lingers on her tongue like something dangerous disguised as dessert. The room is silent except for the soft clink of porcelain as her tea is poured. Not by a maid, by herself. She never liked being waited on. She said people serve better when they don't realize they are. She stirs the tea gently, matcha, thick, bitter, the kind that stains your breath green and makes your mind sharpen like a blade just pulled from its sheath. The paper walls let in the wind scented faintly with pine and charcoal. Far away, a flute plays something too slow to dance to. Perhaps it's not meant to be heard at all. Perhaps it's only for her. Lady Yodogimi has lived a life written in edits. Born as Chacha, daughter to a rival clan, she became consort to the most powerful man in Japan, Hideyoshi, through war, strategy, and the soft art of survival. She didn't win him with fluttering fans or soft poems. She won him with stillness, with silence that dared to be stared into. When she first walked into his chambers, she said nothing for 7 minutes. That's how long it took for him to ask her name. She answered, "The same one I will leave with." Tonight she sits with a scroll in her lap. Not scripture, not law. A list of names, each one carefully brushed in ink, each one crossed out in red. The names of the men who once promised safety and gave her only delays. She's not angry. She's awake. In her sleeve is a folded poem, one she wrote as a girl, hidden for years. It reads, "When the fire dies, the ashes remember who lit it." There is a small bronze mirror beside her tea. She doesn't look into it often, but tonight she does. Her reflection is steady, the powder on her cheeks untouched. Her lips remain curved, though she hasn't smiled since morning. She had 3 kimonos made for tonight. She wore none of them. Instead, she sits in plain silk, soft grey, the colour of smoke and memory. At her feet, wrapped in linen, is a lacquered box. Inside, a lantern, hand-painted, passed from her mother and her mother before that. It's not beautiful, cracked at the base, edges worn, but it holds light like it knows how to protect it. She lights it now, just barely, a single flicker, enough to see the edges of the room bend gently in gold. She once said that lies bend light, not break it. Tonight she's telling herself the truth, quietly, no audience, no paper, just the walls, the tea, the flame. She's ready, not to die, not yet, but to vanish. Her son will live, or not. The shogunate will rise or fall, but Yodogami will slip away before anyone sees her shadow leave the room. She finishes the last of the mochi. The flavour is different now, softer, not because of the ingredients, because of the decision. She ties her hair back, one knot, no pins. She folds the list of names and feeds it into the lantern flame. It curls, blackens, disappears. The flute stops playing, no sound now, only the heartbeat of paper lanterns breathing in wind. She lies down on the mat, one hand under her head, the other resting on her chest. She does not close her eyes. Sleep will come when it's ready. She's not in a hurry. And now, as the paper walls dim to outlines and the scent of burnt ink replaces the tea's bitterness, we slip away from Kyoto, across seas, across centuries. Another queen waits, and this one, she's hiding something beneath her corset that no one would expect. We'll find her next. Breathe in slowly, just enough to notice the scent of wood smoke and orange peel mingling with something older, something heavier. You're in Vienna. The year is 1757, and the palace is warm but not friendly. A place filled with polished mirrors, gold leaf, lace, and the kind of silence that only power can afford. She stands in her dressing chamber, facing the fire, one foot resting on the velvet footstool, half-laced corset open at the back. Maria Theresa, the only female ruler of the Habsburg Empire, Queen of Hungary and Bohemia. But tonight she's not dressed for state. Tonight she's dressed for clarity. She fastens the corset herself. No help. She prefers the strain, the pull of it, the exact point where breath meets resistance, The fabric stretches, bones creak. Her hands work with practiced rhythm, tying knots that hold not just fabric, but everything else in place. Suspicion, calculation, need. What's hidden beneath the boning of the corset, though, that's the real secret. A single charcoal sketch, folded small, thin as a pressed flower drawn by a lover long gone. Not royal, not even noble, a court musician, the kind of man who understood rhythm, not protocol. He'd once traced her collarbone with his bowstring. She never forgot. She doesn't unfold the sketch tonight. But she knows it's there. Behind her, a tray of half-eaten Kaiserschmarrn rests on a marble table. Torn pancake, caramelized edges, dusted with sugar and served with warm plum compote. Her favorite dessert, even more when it's imperfect, burnt slightly on one side the way the palace kitchen never dares unless she orders it herself. She picks up a piece with her fingers. No fork, no etiquette, just hunger. The sugar sticks to her fingertips as the syrup slides across her wrist. She doesn't wipe it away. A fire crackles behind her, logs shifting, red coals breathing like an animal at rest. She feels more kinship with that fire than with half the royal court. At least the fire is honest. At least it doesn't flatter. Maria Theresa doesn't trust flattery. She trusts paper. Her desk is covered in it. Maps, letters, military reports, birth records, funeral notices. She reads each one like a surgeon opening a chest. No tremble, no mercy. Every margin is marked. Ink stains her thumbnails. But next to the papers is a small worn book, a collection of German lullabies. She opens it sometimes, late at night, and hums to herself. Not out loud, just enough for her breath to carry the tune. One her mother used to sing, one she tried to sing to her children, until court etiquette told her lullabies were for wet nurses. She sang them anyway. One of her daughters, Maria Josefa, used to bite her nails down to the quick. No one could stop her. Not tutors, not nannies. But once, during a thunderstorm, Maria Theresa sat beside her, took her hand and dipped each finger into apricot jam. She said, "Sweet things deserve to be tasted, not destroyed." Josefa never bit her nails again. Maria Theresa was not soft, but she was tender in secret, and dangerous in daylight. She once made a bishop cry simply by reciting his own sermon back to him, word for word with her eyes closed. She memorized everything, every insult, every betrayal, every time someone called her just a mother, just a wife, just a woman. She had 16 children, but she never let motherhood be mistaken for submission. At court dinners, she wore gowns with heavy skirts that dragged behind her like waves. She walked slowly, deliberately. Let them wait. Let them rise when she entered. She didn't look for permission. She looked for openings. And tonight, in her chamber, she finds one. A note has arrived, folded and scentless. No seal, just 3 words. "Are you ready?" She doesn't react. She burns it. Not with ceremony, with precision. She places it in the fire, watches the flames curl the paper into nothing. Then she turns back to her corset, tightens the last lace. She breathes in, once, twice, and lets the garment hold her together. Her fingers return to the half-eaten Kaiserschmarrn. She takes one more bite, this time letting the plum syrup stain her lips. Sweetness, even now. Then silence. She walks to the window. Snow is falling softly. Each flake catches the light, turns, disappears. She whispers something. 3 syllables, maybe a name, maybe a memory, maybe the last thing she said to the musician whose sketch still warms the curve of her ribs. She doesn't cry, she doesn't sleep, but she does sit, and the fire keeps burning and the paper keeps turning to ash. And just beyond the gate, another queen is adjusting her veil, hiding a flask of something strong beneath her hemline, the crowd outside chanting a name she doesn't want to answer to. Let's follow her. The crowd outside is louder than thunder, but thinner. It comes in waves, cheers, murmurs, the occasional chant of her name like a stone thrown gently at a window. Inside, behind velvet curtains and heavy perfume, she adjusts her veil not because it's slipped, but because it's habit now. We're in Paris. The year is 1770 and a girl has just arrived from Austria, barely 15, not yet a queen. not yet anything but a name with a destiny sewn into it. Her name is Marie Antoinette, but right now she's only Maria Antonia, and she doesn't know whether to feel excited or erased. She sits on the edge of a long chaise, in a palace chamber she does not yet own, fingers wrapped around the cool metal of a flask hidden beneath layers of silk. Not water, not wine, something else. Apricot brandy, strong and syrupy, stolen from the footman's stash during the endless ride across the countryside. She sips it, lets it sting her throat, and wonders if queens are allowed to feel afraid. The veil she wears was pressed with lavender. It still smells like her mother's wardrobe, like the warmth of places she can never return to. It itches slightly at the temple, but she keeps it on. They told her, "Your hair must be powdered." They told her, "You must not smile too much." They told her, "France is your new body." She didn't understand that last one. Not yet. Now she does. Her breakfast sits untouched on a tray near the window, thick brioche, a smear of clotted cream and candied orange peel cut into elegant little curls. She bites one piece of orange, chews it slowly, lets the bitterness roll behind the sweetness. She likes it more than she's supposed to. They told her queens prefer plain food. They lied. She prefers contradiction. On her vanity, beside a half-open box of pearl hairpins, is a letter. She's read it a dozen times. Her mother's handwriting, tight, unforgiving. Lines underlined 3 times, warnings disguised as blessings. You must be charming without opinion, silent without appearing dull, generous without showing hunger. It ends. You're not for yourself anymore. Marie doesn't cry, but she does fold the letter into a smaller and smaller square until it feels like nothing in her palm. She tucks it into the lining of her shoe, a place no one will ever look. She reaches again for the flask. One more sip. She knows this will be the last moment of real quiet for a long time. Her maids enter. Her new French wardrobe is laid out. Layers of powder blue, lace, garters, buckled shoes. The dress is so stiff it stands on its own, like it's wearing her. They'll do her hair now. Pull, pin, powder, transform, and she will not speak during it. Not because she's shy, but because if she opens her mouth now, she may say something true. Marie Antoinette learns fast. She learns that smiles must be practiced, even when your feet hurt from standing. She learns that every mirror is a weapon, especially the ones held by other women. She learns that dessert is the only time no one speaks politics. She keeps her favourites close. Almond custards, rose-petal jellies, and a tiny cake made with almond flour and lemon zest. 1 bite only, soft in the centre. She eats them in bed, in secret. With the curtains drawn, she learns how to listen without reacting, how to sit with her back perfectly straight, even when the room spins from too much brandy and too little kindness. She starts writing her own letters, but she doesn't send them. She burns them one by one in a porcelain dish, watching the words curl into smoke. Before each flame catches, she whispers the name of someone who will never know who she really was. Tonight she has a fitting, and a final one. A white gown embroidered with silver thread. So heavy it takes 2 attendants to lift the train. When they bring it in, she just laughs. Softly. Not bitter, just tired. And before she steps into it, she lifts the hem of her underdress and fastens the flask to her thigh with a piece of ribbon. Not because she plans to drink. Because she wants to remember this feeling. The chill of metal. The weight of choice. The last thing that is hers. The crowd cheers again. The doors open. The veils are lifted. She walks forward, head high, lips closed, mind spinning. And behind her, on the bed, lies a napkin with one final orange peel curl. Unfinished, forgotten, but not really, not by her. Now we close the door, not loudly, just enough to let the moment hold. And far away in a palace carved of salt and marble, another queen wakes to find a snake on her pillow, and she doesn't scream. Let's go to her. There's a hush in the room, the kind that only arrives after someone stops breathing. The air is too still, not lifeless, just waiting, and the candlelight dances against deep red drapes, casting ripples like blood diluted in water. We're in Cairo, the year is 1293, and the palace is carved with language. Every arch, every wall, every door etched with verses and prayers. But in this room, There are no words, just silk, and the woman sitting among it. Shajar al-Dur, the sultana who once ruled behind a curtain, then without one, a queen who took a name that means tree of pearls and wore it like a sword. Tonight her silk cabinet is open. Inside it, folded into perfect squares, are layers and layers of fabric. Some dyed with saffron, others dipped in indigo until they hold the colour of a storm just before lightning. Each one smells of something different: cardamom, dust, rosewater, and in one case, musk strong enough to make a memory tremble. She's sitting on the floor now, knees folded, her robe loose. The tiles beneath her are cold but clean, scrubbed by hand at her order. Her hair is wrapped tonight, not because of tradition, but because the quiet demands it. Across from her on the windowsill a snake rests, small, pale, coiled like a ribbon, its head barely raised, watching. She hasn't asked the guards to remove it. Not yet. There's something about it she respects. She picks up a piece of silk from the cabinet, cream-coloured, soft enough to slip through a ring. She runs it over her knuckles, then her cheek. She closes her eyes. It was this fabric, this exact piece that she wore when she was crowned in secret, behind the screen in the mosque. Only 6 people knew. One of them betrayed her. One of them tried to save her. The rest are buried under titles. The cabinet holds other things too, not just silk. A small glass jar filled with dried orange blossoms, a wooden comb with 3 missing teeth, a pair of earrings shaped like crescent moons, one chipped, the other bent, and a sweet half-wrapped in wax paper honey almond nougat. Hard at first, then sticky, melting slowly behind the teeth. Her favourite, not for the taste, for the time it took to eat. She used to unwrap one every night after council, sit on her cushions, and let the almond pieces work themselves free as she read old battle reports, written by men who thought she wouldn't understand them. She understood everything. Shajar al-Dur had no illusions about the men around her. They were sandstorms in fine robes, loud, temporary. She outlasted them by being quieter, sharper, slower. She chose her words like a weaver picks thread, only when it fits, only when it holds. The silk cabinet was built for her by a lover, one whose name history swallows awkwardly. He brought her damask from Damascus, silk from the coast, a bolt of fabric dyed with beetles that shimmered like oil when the light hit it right. He died young. She never cried. But she never let anyone touch the cabinet but her. Back to the room now. The snake hasn't moved, still watching. The candle burns low, its wax folding in on itself like old parchment. She finishes the last bite of nougat, wipes her fingers on the hem of her robe, then places one strip of crimson silk across her lap. This is the fabric she'll wear tomorrow. Not to a banquet, not to court, to a tomb, not hers, but close. She has written a letter, 7 lines, no signature. It's tucked beneath the glass jar. If found, it would raise questions. If read, it would silence them. She lies back now, resting her head against the silk piles. The stone beneath her is hard, unforgiving, but the silk softens it. That's how she lived too, making stone comfortable. She whispers something in a language older than Cairo, older than power. The snake shifts slightly, uncoils just an inch, then stills again. She smiles, not because she's at peace, but because she's in control, even here, even now. The candle snuffs itself and the silk cabinet closes with a sigh. And Shajar al-Dur disappears into the folds. Somewhere else, far from the desert heat, another queen is laughing into a mirror lined with pearls, testing how far her smile can stretch before it becomes something sharp. Let's go find her. The music is too slow to dance to, but that's the point. This isn't a ballroom. It's a stage disguised as a palace, and every person inside wears a mask, even when their face is bare. The chandeliers drip with wax, the air is laced with powder and perspiration, and the mirrors reflect things that never quite happened. We're in Versailles. The year is 1754, and the Queen hasn't been crowned yet. She's still a duchess, still half whisper, half theory, still too beautiful to be ignored and too clever to be trusted. Madame de Pompadour, mistress to Louis XV, the woman who taught France how to flirt with ruin and make it look like art. She's sitting before a mirror alone, though she's never truly alone. The reflection staring back at her is softer than it used to be. Powder covers fatigue, rouge masks worry. But the eyes, they're still dangerous. On the table before her, a brush carved from ivory, a string of pearls that has seen too much, and a dish of candied violets, delicate and strange, like sugared paper dissolving on the tongue. She takes one now, places it on her lips, waits for the perfume to melt into sweetness. It does, barely. The mirror isn't just for beauty, it's for study. Pompadour watches herself the way a strategist watches a map, looking for openings, weaknesses, unspoken truths. She adjusts a curl, leans left, pauses, smiles, stops. The door behind her clicks. A letter is slipped under. She doesn't turn. Not yet. Instead, she leans closer to the glass, traces the outline of her jaw with one gloved finger, then whispers a question she doesn't expect an answer to. "Who am I tonight?" There are 3 gowns laid out across the chaise. 1 blue, 1 gold, 1 red. She ignores them all. Chooses the black velvet instead. No embroidery, no lace. Just silk that moves like a whisper through smoke. She likes to be unexpected. At the masquerade tonight, they'll pretend not to know her. They'll ask where she's from. She'll lie. They'll guess her name. She'll shrug. They'll offer her champagne and scandal. She'll take both. But before she leaves, she opens the letter. Inside, 4 words. Your mask is slipping. No signature, no seal. She smiles. Perfect. She tucks the note into her bodice just behind the lace near the skin, where secrets feel warm. Her maids enter, barely breathing, barely blinking. They powder her neck, lace her corset, adjust her earrings. She lets them. Not because she needs them, but because performance demands crew. Before she steps out, she eats another candied violet. It tastes like memory. The hallway beyond the chamber is lined with mirrors, each one tall, gilt, cold. She walks slowly, watching herself stretch and shimmer in every pane. At the end of the corridor, a masked man waits. She does not ask his name. She gives him her hand. He kisses it. She doesn't smile. The masquerade is held in a private garden, canopies stitched from silk, candelabras balanced on marble pedestals. Everywhere, colour and costume. A woman dressed as the moon, a man as a wolf, another as a priest with no prayers. Pompadour arrives as herself, and yet not. They greet her with riddles. She replies with lies. Someone asks her what perfume she's wearing. She says betrayal. No one laughs. They wouldn't dare. The night unfolds in soft layers. Wine passed hand to hand, grapes dipped in sugar, sweet cheeses left melting on silver plates. She eats little, drinks less, watches more. From across the garden, she sees him. Not her king, the other one. The one who writes letters in the margins of books. He's dressed as Orpheus tonight. How fitting. Always playing songs no one else can hear. He approaches. They don't speak. They don't need to. She offers him a violet. He refuses. He always does. Back in her chamber hours later, she removes the mask slowly, not like a queen undressing, like a magician revealing nothing. The mirror is waiting. She sits, looks, sees a woman who knows everything, including how to be forgotten. The letter remains tucked behind her lace. The violets are gone. Only the aftertaste remains. And outside, just beyond the hedge maze, a young queen is walking in a robe too thin for the cold, carrying something stolen and something broken in each hand. Let's meet her. The stones beneath her feet are slick with frost, but she keeps walking. No slippers, no guards, just silence wrapped in silk. The sky above her is the kind of black that swallows sound, and every breath she exhales turns to smoke before it disappears. She doesn't shiver. She doesn't pause. She's done that already. Too many times. We're in Russia. The year is 1729, and the girl walking through the frozen corridor of the Winter Palace is not yet Empress. Not yet anything, really. Just Catherine, born without a crown, carrying too much in her hands. In her right hand, a small feather, white, delicate, nearly translucent, taken from a pillow that belonged to her mother, one she'd ripped open the night she was told she'd be married off to a stranger she would never love. In her left hand, a button, wooden, old, cracked at the edges. It had fallen from the coat of a stable boy who once taught her how to climb a tree without tearing her skirt. He gave her the button before he vanished. She never asked why. Now she carries both, clutched tightly like relics of a life that once fit her better. Her nightdress is too thin, not made for this wind, but she needed to feel something, the real cold, not the chill of court, not the sting of false smiles, actual cold, the kind that reminds her she's still breathing. She walks slowly, letting her feet numb, listening to the echo of each step along the marble corridor. She reaches the end of the hall and opens the small door on the left, the one no one uses, the one that leads to the abandoned nursery. No one follows her, no one dares. Inside it smells of cedar and age. The wallpaper is peeling, the toys untouched, but the fireplace still works. She kneels and lights it herself. 1 match, 2 sparks, then flame. She sits on the floor, crosses her legs and places the feather and button beside her. Then, from a hidden fold in her robe, she pulls out a paper-wrapped square of honey bread. She takes a bite. Sweet, dense, spiced with cloves and cinnamon. The kind that crumbles just enough to make a mess. She doesn't care. She eats slowly, letting each piece soften on her tongue before swallowing. It's her favourite. She never tells anyone that. They think she prefers caviar or venison or the royal pastries with their gold foil and stiff sugar roses. But no, just honey bread. Simple, real. The kind her grandmother used to bake in a clay oven that cracked in the winter. She eats, stares into the fire and thinks. About nothing and about everything. She once said, "If I'm to survive this life, I must taste something real every day." This is how she does it. Tomorrow she'll go back. She'll smile at Peter, she'll nod at the ministers, she'll wear the sapphire gown and say nothing when they talk over her. But tonight here, in this dust-covered room with her stolen feather and her broken button and her last bite of bread, she's just herself. And that is enough. The fire crackles, the floor warms, she lies down, head on her folded arm, eyes half closed. Not asleep, not yet, just resting. And as the wind outside howls and the empire rearranges itself beyond the walls, Catherine listens for nothing. Because silence too is power. Tomorrow she will use it. But tonight she dreams of feathers falling in snow, and far away in a land of silk screens and plum wine, another queen holds a secret in her sleeve and a blade in her smile. We'll go to her next. The paper lanterns sway in slow rhythm, casting shadows that stretch and curl along the tatami floors. Outside, the cherry trees rustle faintly, more gesture than sound, and the pond reflects a sky that's too still to be trusted. We are in Kyoto. The year is 988, during the height of the Heian court. Every sleeve is poetry, every smile a weapon. She's known by many names in scrolls and songs, but tonight we call her Lady Sei, court writer, noble consort, and woman of 1,000 unfinished letters. She kneels before her inkstone, grinding pigment with deliberate ease. Her robe, layered in 12 silks of descending colours, spills around her like the petals of a camellia floating in a shallow bowl. Her sleeve is longer than necessary. It drags, folds, brushes the inkstone as she works. It hides things. Inside the left one, a folded fan, sharp-edged, lacquered black, with a blade hidden at the base. A gift from a monk who once told her the gods didn't mind clever women, only loud ones. She took it as encouragement. Inside the right, sugar plums wrapped in mulberry paper. She eats one now, slow and silent, letting the tang sit on her tongue before it sweetens. The taste reminds her of something. A room, a robe falling from a shoulder, the first lie told without blinking. Her favourite indulgence has always been sweet rice cakes dusted with roasted soybean powder. Kinako. Soft, warm, a little bitter, like truth. She once wrote in her pillow book, "A woman should not smile because she is pleased. She should smile because no one else is." Her smile tonight is that kind. Measured, curved, unreadable. In front of her lies a scroll, half finished. A poem meant for no one. Not a love poem. Those are too easy. This one is about silence. The kind that falls between two people who once shared everything and now share only memory. The Emperor passed her by earlier that morning. Didn't stop, didn't look, but his sleeve brushed hers. It was enough. Lady Sei writes with her back straight, her hands steady, her hair flowing in one long sheet down her back. Every now and then she reaches up and adjusts a strand, not because it's in the way, but because it's expected. Her chamber is lined with cedar, lit by oil lamps too small to warm anything but the space between breath and bone. She prefers it that way. Warmth invites softness. She doesn't have time for soft. From beneath her writing table, she pulls a wooden box, small, square, stained with ink fingerprints. Inside are fragments, letters from other women, fragrances sealed in cloth, a single tooth from a wolf she met in the mountains, and a comb carved with the imperial crest, cracked right through the center. She runs her thumb along the break. It broke the day she walked out of the Empress's private quarters, her voice calm, her soul louder than ever before. She keeps it not out of grief, but as proof. She rises now, steps slowly to the window. Outside, the night carries the scent of plum blossoms and ink. Below, a man plays a biwa, its notes slow and stretched, like questions you don't want answers to. She leans out slightly, lets the wind slip through her robe and listens, not to the music, to the spaces between notes, so that's where the truth is. Behind her, the ink dries. The plums sit half-eaten, the sleeves whisper secrets to the air as they shift with her movement. She smiles again, the kind of smile you write poems about but never understand. And just before she closes the window, she looks up. The moon is full, not round, not golden, full, and somewhere beyond the palace walls, in a kingdom far from poetry and too close to war, a queen sharpens a knife not for protection, but for inheritance. Let's meet her. The castle is made of stone, but it breathes like something alive. Cold draughts slip through the cracks, no matter how many tapestries are hung or how many fires are lit. The smell of iron never leaves. Metal, blood, history. We're in Castile, the year is 1504, and the queen stands alone in the chamber where her mother died. Juana of Castile, though the court prefers to call her Juana la Loca now. Mad, they whisper, unhinged, too emotional, too intelligent, too unwilling to behave like a silent shadow beside a king. But tonight she's none of those things. Tonight she's only a woman holding a knife, not pointed outward, but down, resting against a scroll sealed in her mother's name. The knife is not large, it is not ornate, just a kitchen blade borrowed from the servants' quarters, but it's sharp, balanced, real. She sets it on the table beside a plate of almond cake, her favourite, the dense kind moist in the middle, dusted in cinnamon and sugar, the kind her mother once shared with her in secret, when they were still speaking in truths, not expectations. She takes a bite, slowly, chews, swallows, not because she's hungry, because she remembers. The letter in front of her is written in her mother's hand. She's read it a dozen times, more. The words have memorized themselves against her skin. It isn't long. It doesn't need to be. A list, instructions, warnings, and at the very bottom, do not love so loudly they can hear it bleed. Juana loved loudly. She loved Philip the Handsome with a hunger that embarrassed everyone around her. She kissed him in public. She wept when he left. She screamed when he returned, with other women's perfume on his skin. And now, he's dead? They said it was fever. They said it was divine will. They said nothing else. But Juana knew. She knew how love leaves the body, quickly, then forever. She didn't bury him right away, not out of madness, out of refusal. She rode with his coffin, touched it each morning, sang to it at night. The court turned it into legend. But it was grief, simple, pure, and hers. She sets the cake aside, reaches for the knife again. Not to harm, to cut the seal. This scroll, this document, makes her Queen of Castile, fully, unequivocally. No more acting as wife. No more waiting for men to decide her worth. But the court is already plotting. Her father, Ferdinand, wants control. Her son is too young. Her sisters are silent. So she reads the scroll again, then folds it, then presses the blade against the edge. Not cutting it, just marking it. Letting it know she's ready. The candle beside her flickers. The wax drips onto the parchment. She doesn't flinch. She smears the wax across the table with her thumb. The smell, burned sugar and ash, fills the space between her and the door, Her hair is unbound tonight. Long, tangled, darker than the shadows pressed into the corners. She hasn't spoken in hours. Not since she heard them through the keyhole, whispering, planning, measuring her like a window, something to close, something to cover. She gets up, walks to the hearth, throws the scroll into the fire. Not because she doesn't want the crown, because she doesn't want their version of it. She stands there until the parchment curls, then folds in on itself. Then she returns to the table, picks up the last bite of cake, chews, swallows, leaves the knife behind. She opens the window. The night smells of frost and crushed rosemary. And somewhere, across the plains, men are already riding with a new declaration. She lets them come, but before they arrive, before the history books write her off again, she writes her own name on the inside of her sleeve. Not for them, for her. Outside, the wind howls, and far north, in a room carved from candlelight and ambition, a queen is painting her lips with wine and plotting how to vanish without ever leaving. Let's go to her top of form, bottom of form. The walls were the colour of old parchment, warm even in candlelight. Not grand, not loud, but heavy with memory. A kind of hush hung over the room, the hush of velvet drapes drawn close, of fire settling into red coals, of footsteps that stop just outside the door, the kind of quiet that waits. It's Scotland, the year is 1567, and the Queen is alone. Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots. Tall, elegant, a beauty stitched in silk and strategy. She stands before a low mirror, not preening, not preparing, but watching. Watching her own reflection with the kind of gaze a person reserves for a stranger they almost recognize. The mirror is cracked slightly at the edge. She doesn't fix it. She likes that it reflects the truth with flaws. On the table near her, a goblet of claret rests, dark red, rich, slow to stain the rim. She dips her finger in the wine, then presses it softly against her bottom lip. A slow, steady motion. No rush. The wine leaves a faint blush. Not cosmetic. Ritual. She does this every evening. She says nothing as she does. She doesn't need to. Beside the goblet, a plate of oat bannock sits cooling. Thick slices, dense with currants and honey, baked by the kitchen maid who still remembers Mary's favourite from when she was 15. The outside has gone slightly crisp from the fire's heat, but the centre is still warm, still soft. She picks one up, takes a bite, chews slowly, lets the sweetness fill her mouth and the memory rise with it. France, a balcony, hands brushing against hers, young fingers still uncalloused by rule. The taste of that summer was also oat and honey and something too tender to name. She swallows. The window is open a crack. A wind drifts in. Not cold, not sharp, just enough to stir the edge of her gown, to remind her that the night lives just outside her grasp. She places the bannock back on the plate, wipes her fingertips on the napkin folded neatly at her side. Every move she makes is practiced, but not for vanity, for clarity. The candle nearest her flickers. The flame dances just enough to make the shadows behind her stretch long against the stone wall. She doesn't turn. Instead, she walks slowly to the writing desk. She opens the drawer. Inside, a folded parchment sealed with red wax, unbroken. Her cousin's crest pressed into the wax. Elizabeth. She lifts the letter. She doesn't open it. She places it gently, face down, back in the drawer. Not today. Instead, from a hidden slit in the side of the drawer, she pulls out a piece of parchment far smaller, more worn, its edges soft like old fabric. A map, hand-drawn, ink faded at the bends. It shows the servants' passage behind the chapel. 2 exits, one hidden by ivy, the other by an old orchard gate. She studies it again, not because she's unsure, but because the act of remembering steadies her. She runs her finger along the route, from her chamber, through the west hall, beneath the arches, past the storerooms, out, not escape, departure. She folds the map into the cuff of her sleeve, returns to the table, takes another sip of claret, lets it linger. Her gown tonight is not royal. It's dark grey, simple wool lined with soft linen, easy to move in, easy to vanish in. The sleeves are long, the hem stitched hastily. There's a tear near the side seam, half mended. She presses it flat with her palm. The fire hisses as it eats a knot in the wood. She glances at the flames, then to the mirror again, and this time she smiles, a slow, slight curl of the mouth. Not joy, not irony, a promise. She lifts a lock of hair from her shoulder and pins it back. One pin, that's enough. The rest she leaves loose. Let them say she looked wild when she left. Let them wonder. On the shelf behind her rests a small wooden box, barely hand-sized, polished by time. She opens it gently. Inside, a single pearl, the last gift from her mother. She doesn't wear it. She places it in her pocket. Then she walks across the room, quiet as a breath, and lifts the latch to the servants' corridor. The door creaks, just a little. She doesn't wince. She steps through. Stone underfoot, walls narrowing. The torch she carries is small but steady. She walks slowly, the sound of her steps swallowed by old stone and older secrets. Every twist of the corridor is familiar. Every cold draft is expected. She passes the chapel, where candles flicker against the altar. She pauses, just a moment, closes her eyes. Doesn't pray, just listens. To the wind through the gaps, to the wood beams above shifting, to her own pulse, she moves on. At the end of the passage, she finds the first door, locked. She expected that. She reaches beneath her sleeve, pulls out a thin wire, slips it into the lock. She used to watch the stable boys do this for fun. Now it opens with a click. The orchard beyond is dark. Moonlight touches only the tops of the trees. She steps out, the air smells like damp leaves and night apples. She breathes it in, deeper than she's breathed all week. A bird rustles in the branches. She waits. It quiets. She walks. Not rushed, not cautious, just forward. She knows the path by feel, past the stone bench, past the tree that once bloomed white flowers so heavy they bent the branches. She reaches the gate. It creaks too. She smiles again. She disappears. Not like a ghost. Like a woman who decided. Behind her, the palace stays lit. And far away across snow-covered mountains and candlelit banquets, another queen dips her fingers into ink and begins a sentence no one will be allowed to finish but her. And we'll be there when she does. The ink is still wet. Not much, just a little glisten along the tail of a letter. The part where the pen paused for breath. Or doubt. She doesn't blot it. She lets it dry naturally. Paper should carry memory, not perfection. We're in Vienna. The year is 1806. And the Empress sits alone in a high-backed chair lined with velvet so worn it has stopped pretending to be elegant. The window beside her is open just a crack, enough to let in a breeze that smells faintly of snow, old books, and the last garden leaves dying sweetly beneath the frost. Maria Ludovica, third wife to Emperor Francis II. She's young, too young to hold the empire on her shoulders, but here she is, pen in hand, wrists smudged with ink, hair slightly unpinned from hours of leaning forward into candlelight. She does not wear a crown. She wears a robe the colour of overripe plum, soft at the edges, heavy where it folds. Around her neck, no necklace, but tied at her throat, loose and slipping, is a scrap of silk. The kind used to wrap sachertorte, that rich chocolate cake filled with apricot and glaze. Her favourite. Not because of the chocolate, because of the way the apricot sneaks in just at the end. Unexpected, warm, tart, like truth hidden in sweetness. There's a half-eaten slice on the table. She picks at it with her fingers. No fork, no decorum, just hands. She licks a bit of glaze from the edge of her thumb and sighs. Not from exhaustion, but from recognition. She's been here before. Different day, same fight. Her quill hovers. The letter is to her stepdaughter. But it is also to herself. It is not a lecture. Not a warning. It is a story, a truth dressed in lace and velvet. She writes, "The world will always ask you to smile as they weigh you down with silence. Smile anyway, but carry a knife where they least expect it. Mine was made of ink." She dots the final sentence, lets the ink dry. Behind her, the palace settles, wood creaks. A guard sneezes somewhere down the hall. The stove hisses. Her slippers rest beside the hearth, warmed from within by stones wrapped in felt, an old Tyrolean trick. She'll put them on before she walks to bed, but not yet. She takes another bite of the cake. The apricot hits again. She closes her eyes and lets it melt. Then, without rising, She reaches into the drawer beside her chair and pulls out a small tin box. The kind that once held pins or coins. She opens it. Inside, letters folded tight. Too tight. From another life. From a girl who wrote to no one, hoping someone would find the words someday and call them beautiful. She reads one now. The paper is thin, the ink has bled, but the voice inside is sharp, young, brave. It says, "I will not be admired for being quiet. I will be remembered for being uninvited." She smiles. Not the court smile, the real one, the one with the crooked left side and the line beneath her eye. She kisses the edge of the paper and folds it back into its place. The wind pushes harder through the cracked window. She doesn't close it. She likes the way it touches her neck, like a whisper that doesn't need permission. The fire burns low, the candle trembles, and the letter she wrote, it stays on the table, not sealed, not sent, just ready. She stands now, slowly. Her bones ache in ways no one knows, not from age, from carrying history too early. She slips on her warm slippers, ties the sash of her robe, takes the last bite of cake, and just before she blows out the candle, she whispers something to the ink. A thank you, a goodbye, maybe both. The room goes dark, but not empty, because somewhere the scent of apricot still lingers. And the truth she wrote down, it doesn't need an empire to survive. It just needs memory. And now, let this final flicker fade. May these memories guide you into peaceful dreams. If you drifted off tonight, let me know below. Sweet dreams, always. Stories that make you sleep, signing off.